Okay, here we are. Alt.nerd.obsessive. Worst episode ever.
Hey everybody, welcome to Worst Episode Ever, a podcast for people who love The Simpsons by people who love The Simpsons, about how much we hate The Simpsons. We're here trying to find which is the worst episode ever. My name is Dan.
My name is Jack.
And we are back, our post-April Fool's episode, so we're talking about The Simpsons.
See, I was really hoping that wasn't an April Fool's. I just
a
thought
format
we were
change?
the network, the boys upstairs. They said, the people want more empty desks.
The suits at Wii Studios are demanding it, but you know what we said? Let's go one more Simpsons one, see how it's received.
See how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. So we're back.
Yeah, and thanks for everybody for listening to our those who stuck through the empty desk.
Yeah.
Or even those who didn't. Thanks for giving it a shot anyway.
Right.
It divided some people.
We got an array of feedback. Some people loved it.
I think it's good that. We were talking about this right before we recorded. My phone broke, and I had to
Yes.
I'm using an old flip phone now, and I had to reinstall all my contacts, and it's really annoying. But it's also good because you're putting in, you're weeding down contacts.
You're reassessing your entire life, basically.
So, you weed down your contacts, you clean it up a bit. So I feel like that empty desk episode was a nice purge for us. We didn't want to get too big.
Yeah.
You don't want to end up selling out like your wait, don't tell me's.
Right.
You want to keep it niche.
So the Empty Nest podcast, we pushed so many listeners away that now we're still a nice niche podcast.
Didn't Thomas Jefferson say something about how every
once in a while you do an Empty Nest podcast?
Yeah,
it's in the Declaration of
Independence.
Yeah. Today we have another episode for you. It is called The Greatest Story Ever Doed. It is episode 16 from season 21. It originally aired in March of 2010, so just over 5 years ago. This was suggested by my friend Rich. He told me in person, and a friend of the show, Amy Capuano.
We're going to say, any of our Italian American or Italian listeners, or even if you're not and your just name vaguely resembles an Italian name,
we'll do that voice.
And you don't see it, but we're like waving our hands. And,
Capuano.
I don't know why we emphasize the accent more, as if that somehow illustrates the arm movement.
It kind of did, like, Capuano,
Do you hear our arms through?
Did you hear how
airwaves?
Flailing I was? It was. I almost broke things in Wii Studios.
Yeah, thank you guys for the recommendation, and we'll see.
Yeah, Jack, you have not. Have you seen this one? What we got?
I haven't seen this one at all.
I haven't seen this one either. All I know about it is it's The Simpsons Go to Israel, and Sacha Baron Cohen is in it.
And we're doing it obviously because a couple of holidays had just passed.
Right, Passover and Easter, both religious holidays.
I was talking about April Fool's Day and
Empty Nest Day.
Yeah,
which coincidentally are the same day. It's nuts. So thanks everybody for downloading the show. If you like the show, please spread the word and help us grow our audience a little bit. Tell people it's actually about The Simpsons this week and not about...
Tell them not to start with last week's.
Yeah, that's why I put that thing up on the website to say, this is a bad episode for new listeners.
We should just do that for every episode, just to hedge our bets.
They probably all are bad episodes for new listeners. I don't know.
Don't listen to any. Just imagine in your mind what a great podcast this is.
Just go to the website and be like, I bet it's good.
Yeah, that's
but I won't listen to it. But if you do go to that website, click through the Amazon links. We appreciate it. Yeah. Okay, guys, we're going to take a break and watch the episode, and we will be back
shortly.
It's so nice and cool in the tomb of the unknown savior.
Unknown? This is the tomb of the most famous man who ever lived!
Porky Pig?
Porky Pig's not a man, he's a pig, and he's not even a real pig!
But he is buried here, right?
That's it! I'm losing it! You come all the way to Jerusalem, the happiest place on earth, and all the photos in your camera are of funny soda pops?
So that was, in name only, the greatest story ever doed.
It sure was.
I don't know if that's the apt description of the episode. But,
that's what this podcast is going to find out.
Okay.
You don't know what I think of it. I don't know. Sounds like
I have an idea.
Okay, well. All right, well, why don't we start off with just a quick recap of what this episode was.
A quick recap of what this episode was. Okay, so it starts off with Flanders hosting a Bible study in his living room. And meanwhile, Homer is being, simply put, a jerk-ass outside with the kids, being loud, obnoxious, and being in his underwear, and it's distracting Ned. And eventually, Ned really just, had it, so he invites Homer to the Holy Land. I guess this is to try to convert him or to shut him up.
There's some logical gaps that I think we're going to get into when we're talking about this episode.
To somehow, in some way, to remedy the situation, he invites Homer to the Holy Land, which Marge is game for. So basically, the Bible study group, which includes a random mix of Springfielders and the Simpsons, go to Israel, and that's where it becomes pretty much sort of a Simpsons Goes To episode.
Yep.
So we see some Israeli landmarks, a lot of Israeli puns, Israeli-type music.
And special guest star.
Sacha Baron Cohen, who's Israel's greatest star.
Yeah, that's right.
He's from England. But,
yes.
But he is Jewish, so I guess that qualifies him for this role. And then there was another Israeli guest star who we're unfamiliar with.
Yael Neem, apparently is her name, or Yael
Musician of
Naim.
some
She's
sort.
a musician.
So
From Israel.
she had some lines. So they go on a tour with Sacha Baron Cohen's tour guide. Meanwhile, Homer and Flanders' tension still builds, pretty much the same tension that was in America, until finally Flanders has it, flips out on Homer, and to the point where Homer feels bad. So Homer tries to chase after him in the desert, where he hallucinates and passes out, and the VeggieTales tell him that he is the Messiah. So then he comes back to Israel and tries to become the next Messiah, which is enough crazy for Flanders to go, at least he's trying, and brings everything back to a nice, neat status quo.
Right, where everyone thinks that they are the Messiah.
Yeah, and Dr. Hibbert amusingly included.
Yeah.
Before we talk about how much we hated this episode, this is just for you guys to know, it's another night podcast for us. But interestingly enough, only one of us had Popeyes. Although
right.
I was going to say who, but I think it'll be funnier to let you decide. And then at the end of the podcast, maybe
We'll reveal the answer.
Reveal who had the Popeyes
Try to guess which one.
and who went Popeye-less.
Yeah.
Popeye. Ow!
We'll cut all this.
Was it me? Was it Dan?
Is this our mystery episode? Do we have like a sweepstakes going on? Figure out who ate the Popeyes, and you can win some Popeyes.
You can win a walk-on appearance on our podcast. There he goes.
You don't get a line. You just
walk
walk through the studios. Delightful.
All right. So let's talk. Let's start at the beginning.
I guess, yeah. Let's just really quickly talk about the couch gag.
Really quickly.
The family is kind of brought in on dog leashes like it's a dog show. And I thought that was kind of funny.
Something they haven't done before.
Okay.
It's a thing they can do.
And then there's like a judge, and he awards Bart the medal. And then Homer starts growling and attacking Bart, and then Bart starts attacking Homer.
Are you describing an episode?
No.
Oh, you're still going. This is still the couch gag.
Yeah, it went on a little bit too long, and by a little bit I mean a lot.
Yeah, I literally wrote in my notes, couch drag. Like, that's how I wrote it,
This
too.
guy, you are the voice of a generation, sir. Mazel tov to you.
I just hope one day, like, a whole generation of Gen Z or whatever we are have tattoos that say couch drag.
Just out of context, couch drag.
No, it went on too long.
Yeah, it was not great. That
typical.
kind of describes the rest of the episode. If you didn't watch this episode and you're like, oh, maybe I should watch this episode, do not watch this episode. I'm going to throw that out there.
Or watch it just to see what we're going to be talking about. Like to see,
If you haven't watched it already, well, I guess you should.
But it's gonna be rough. It was. We paused it like 2 different times to stop and get water and stuff, and even that
just collect our thoughts and be like, "What the hell have I answered?"
And even then, each 7-minute segment felt like it went on forever.
Yeah, this episode really, really dragged. So let's just start at the beginning of the actual episode. Yeah. Ned Flanders having Bible study in his home. Something we've never seen, or at least not in like classic episodes. Maybe there's other episodes with it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine. It's like, oh, that's a good thing that hasn't been done yet. Flanders doing Bible study. I'm for it.
Jimbo was there, which falls into my whole, I don't really like the post-classic treatment of the bullies where they try to give them this extra dimension, but it feels kind of tacked on.
Yes, that felt very tacked on because there was not really a joke specific to Jimbo. There was a joke... Sort of a joke about like young people where Flanders was like, I have to use computer words or something every once in a while.
Every 3 sentences he has to say a computer word.
Or else the young people lose interest and Jimbo like starts walking away and Flanders is like, mouse pad, Skype.
Yeah, so first of all, I did chuckle when he said Skype. Like I liked out of desperation.
That
He
was
just
just a
said
funny
the same
delivery.
word twice. That was
Right.
pretty much Harry Shearer's delivery. Now, what's funny? First of all, it's just lame at this point to say, "Hey, kids in their computers." Right off the bat,
And it was lame in 2010 when this episode came
exactly.
out.
So right off the bat, you're using a dated joke. It's it might as well be making fun of rap music at this point.
There's
you might
a
as well
few
be.
of dated
I
jokes,
remember
yeah.
I remember I was on the beach once down on the Jersey Shore, and I was in my teens, and some other group of people were blasting rap music, and then my aunt, my mom's sister, it was that type of family vacation.
Yep.
It was just like rap is crap, and like the whole family, like the whole that part of the family, that generation, just like laughed and pretty much were like high fiving each other. Like
You nailed it.
Yeah, like
Boy, that's where you get your wit from. the
Yeah,
couch
exactly.
drag.
No, and so this was the same thing. So right off the bat, in general, that sucked. But
Yeah.
then it was just, the computer terms they chose,
Yeah,
like
mouse pad.
and double click, like when you think about kids on their, I mean, I know this was pre like
Yeah.
Instagram and Snapchat being the huge things they are,
Right.
But still, double click and mouse pad, come on.
I don't even know if Snapchat's a big thing anymore. There's a thing
Is
called
it out?
Yik Yak. Have you heard of Yik Yak?
Yeah.
I
That's
only vaguely know what it
Snapchat's
is.
out anymore?
Snapchat's out because there was that whole thing where it was like, oh, it's deleting your pictures, but it wasn't really.
Oh, I
So
thought.
everyone's
Are you
dick
sure? I
pics.
feel like it's still really popular.
I'm sure it's still really popular,
teenagers.
but I feel like it took a hit after that.
I know-
Look, I have no idea what's popular with the kids. Okay.
Well, since this is we're recording this fairly soon to our release date.
Yeah.
Apparently, right now the big trend are these live streaming apps like Periscope and the other one.
I don't even know what that is. That means.
The two are competing right now, like Beta and Betamax and
like
VHS.
Down Periscope, starring Kesley
No,
Grammer.
apparently I don't know what you use it for, but it's pretty much like live streaming. But they've made it into such an easy process where now it's becoming a thing. So instead, how like Vine is big right now, and people make the kids make 6-second videos.
Right.
Now the kids are just live streaming, and like now it's got all these implications because you can just apparently a lot of people are watching live TV that way. Like somebody's just periscoping a live television screen.
Oh, that makes sense, sort of. It would be low quality, but I don't understand. Like, let's say I'm using this service, I have a live stream of just me, just sitting in my apartment watching TV.
I guess it's like chat roulette, kind of, except you're focusing what you want to see, assumingly not a penis or somebody masturbating.
That's not what you want to see on chat roulette. That's why you go on there.
I mean, so I don't know.
Why you specifically?
I'm obviously talking out of my depth. I don't know what it is. I've read a couple of articles about it that confused me.
I'm also getting confused now. I feel very old. Like,
Anyway,
I don't understand
My
it.
point is, whether it's Snapchat, Periscope, whatever, it should have occurred to them that double click and mousepad were probably not like Skype. It was along the lines, but I feel almost like Skype is more.
Skype's fine, I guess.
I don't think it's what the teens use, what the kids use. I know we use it in the office, and I know people more our age use it for stuff, or when you Skype your grandma and stuff like that. But I feel like
that didn't sound right when you Skype your grandma.
Sounded okay to me. I don't know where your mind's going.
All right,
but,
I'm in the gutter.
Mouse pad and double click.
Yeah,
not optimal
it
terms.
did not work well. But going back to the whole Jimbo thing,
Yeah.
there was not really a joke about it being Jimbo, and it didn't make sense that it was Jimbo. Jimbo's a bully.
Right.
I guess
Which
they're
that's the
trying
joke.
to like exactly the kind of disparity between him being a bully in real life,
Right.
but also he goes to Bible study. But they never made that joke. They were never like, Jimbo, what are you doing here? It was just Jimbo's here, and he's a weird teenager who needs to hear double click to stay in the room.
He had a skull shirt, but it had a halo on it.
Yeah, it was just not good.
It's I don't want to say shoehorned in. It's because that's almost too gentle. It was like wedged in.
No, it was just
compared
like
to like when he was with his mother and watching a soap opera, where
Right.
that felt totally. Obviously it was a new side of Jimbo we'd never seen
But
before.
that was
but it's
different
like,
because it was like that's Jimbo's private life. That's what he's like when he's not at school.
Exactly. That's
this
why
is
it's
just
a
like
Jimbo joke. Yeah.
Right. This is just Jimbo's at this thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So what does that mean? They just
Yeah.
needed a young character, and it was
Yeah.
just happened to be Jimbo.
Yeah, and if you're doing, and if you're
Could
setting,
have been Millhouse. In fact,
Yeah.
it probably should have been Millhouse.
right, or what I was gonna say, if you're setting up the joke of like the apathetic teen, and you need computer lingo, maybe Sherry and Terry. They seem to me to be like
they're apathetic.
they don't give a shit.
Yeah. Sherry and Terry not really used that much these days, I don't think.
Sherry is. Not so
Not
much
so much Terry. That's a shame. You never know which character's going to take off. Yeah, so let's talk about Homer. Homer's kind of outside doing like a slip and slide thing. He loses his bathing suit, so he's slip and sliding naked, and he's kind of spreads his legs as he goes by Flanders' open window.
Yeah.
That was kind of funny. I thought that was okay.
There's a pun that they make or something. I don't know what.
Well, right after that, Homer lands in a pool, and then he's like, "Hey, it floats." I didn't like that.
Ugh. Yeah, no, I
didn't
don't like that.
at all.
No, there's at some point Flanders says, so he's talking to Lovejoy in the kitchen, which I don't know if we've ever seen the Flanders kitchen. It was very modern.
First appearance, Flanders kitchen.
Very suburban modern. But he says, but there's a big butt or something like that. And then Homer
comes in and says, "Here comes the
big
butt."
And he comes in butt first down the slip and slide, or as I call it, the crocodile mile.
Of course.
And that it was a bad pun, but the visual of Homer going down the slip and slide obnoxiously with his butt out could have been funny.
If he didn't say it. Right?
That too.
And Homer didn't say anything, and just a butt went flying by after Ned said, "Here comes the butt."
I didn't even think of that, but you're 100% right. But no, I was just going to say if it was his bare butt, not his briefs.
Oh.
It's like, yeah, all right, so he's in his briefs. It's like,
yeah.
Whatever. Like, Simpsons have been doing bare butt jokes well since Bart the Genius. Since
the Tracy Ullman days, probably.
Day two. Yeah, actually, I think there is one in the Tracy Ullman days.
Yeah, there's that one about they love butts or whatever. That was the title of
that
the
was
episode.
The very first short. It was that. Very people, you guys think you're hardcore Simpsons fans, but have you seen the very first prototype where they're really crude and like Homer's voice is really off and he's like, "Oh well, we love butts."
Oh, Homer, where are the butts?
Dad, I love butts.
That's Maggie.
Yeah, I figured.
Okay.
We won't even attempt to Lisa, but
I love butts. I don't know what that was.
quality podcast, folks. By the way, have we asked you for money yet? Please shop on Amazon through We. Please pay.
The more money we get, the less of this we'll do. You have to pay us to not do the podcast. More Empty Nest podcasts unless we break even this month.
Sales are through the roof.
Our most callers ever, too.
I don't know. Now's as good a time as any. I want to talk about a production aspect, which I usually specifically don't pay attention to.
Is this about the eyes?
It's about the eyes.
About the eyes.
Like, especially Flanders right off the bat in the first Bible study scene. He looked like he just came from the eye doctor and they dilated his pupils. Like, they were too big. And then I noticed even Homer's were a little slightly big, and a lot of the other characters, they were slightly big, especially Flanders. And I was like, well, maybe it's because he's got his glasses, and now that it's in HD, you can actually see his pupils slightly bigger.
Yeah, right.
But it's just, Matt Groening used to always make a point about how when they were doing the hand-drawn, they had to get the pupils right. He was always frustrated watching the early seasons because the pupils would be wildly off. Like one frame, they would be way bigger. And that's, which is funny because now a lot of us say that crude animation is really part of the charm. Mm-hmm. And now it looks like, and I could be wrong, but it looks like now that they do use computers and such, and it's not hand-drawn, that there's some kind of line of code they can type where all the pupils stay the same size always. So they've eliminated that problem, which means if the size is wrong, it's always wrong.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
constant. And that's what I think it is. It's like the line of code. If I don't know nothing of animation, but if there's a code that you type in, that makes the pupil size, they made it too big.
It's I think it's up, down, left, right, BA, start, select. That's the pupil code.
Is that a Dan Brown novel, The Pupil Code?
Yep. Where Tom Hanks is playing arcade games. He's playing Contra.
And then the prequel, Irises and Demons. Angels and Rods. In my head, I was like, which one would be funnier?
And then the follow-up was
Neither.
Eye-Ferno. Yeah, nailed it. I wanted to talk a bit about, so Flanders comes out and he's kind of yelling at Homer, and Homer does his horrible aggressive sarcasm voice, which Marge even makes a joke like, I could hear your sarcasm from inside and the dishwasher's running.
I liked Marge's delivery. I liked that line.
Yeah, that was
the dishwasher was on.
Yeah.
I liked that, even though it was like just hard to listen to Homer do his sarcastic.
It was just annoying. It's just so abrasive when I'm watching it. I'm just like, ugh, I just like cringe.
For a while now, way before we started doing this podcast, I read about what the internet calls jerk-ass Homer. That's what a lot of
certainly what this is
called, the post-classic Homer. And I was still watching the show up until season 20 or whatever. And I never agreed. I was like, whatever. He's just as it's the show's not funny. It's not as good as it was, but he's pretty much as obnoxious as he's always been. I never quite signed on for jerk ass Homer.
I think this is jerk ass Homer in full effect.
This is like
this is an perfect distillation.
I saw the light. Like it's like holy shit, this is jerk. And like Broadfire the Manatees is our worst episode ever because Homer was such a jerk, but it was a specific type of jerk. He was a bad husband.
Right.
And like where I wouldn't call him a jerk ass because that's not strong enough. He's a bad husband. Like the two words bad husband to me is more insulting than jerk ass. But here he's just jerk ass. Like just like you just want to punch him in the face. And you could say like the fact that they made Flanders like he was like punching the air. He was so I felt
Flanders of all people.
I don't know if it's good writing. I don't want to say there's good writing in this, but it was almost good writing that I felt Flanders' pain, his frustration.
Yeah, but Homer's that way through this entire episode. Yeah. He's pretty just terrible throughout. And last week at Simpsons Trivia, we watched Homer Goes to College.
Great episode.
And I was talking with somebody at Trivia, and we were saying, it was Dave, friend of the show, Dave, since he's been on the show, I'll mention his name. We were talking about how, there's the scene where the bee bit my bottom, now my bottom's big, and Homer's like, that's why they made me head bee guy. Homer was dumb in this kind of like childish way, like almost like innocent, just like simpleton.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I feel like what he is nowadays, which is just aggressively stupid.
Aggressively
and jerk ass is a good way to say it, but it's just
he was definitely aggressive. Like,
it's this just in your face. Like terribleness, where like he's the worst person at all times, always on the screen. Yeah. He's just doing terrible things.
I wish I wrote it down and I didn't, but there was a moment where I was specifically like, they told him not. Either Flanders or Marge said, "Don't do this," and then he specifically did it just to spite them. And I was like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Right. We're jumping ahead now, but Homer lays down on the grave of Jesus Christ because it's like comfortable and cool.
Yeah.
And like that's the joke.
Yeah.
That happens on this episode of The Simpsons.
Happy Easter and happy Passover, everybody.
And I mean, I'm not offended as someone who was raised Catholic. Right. I'm not offended for religious purposes. I'm offended from the fact that
as a comedian.
And the fact that any human being would do that on purpose and just be like that dumb and that like horrible to everyone around him.
I don't know what it says about my moral standing in life that I was slightly more offended that he stole Flanders' Netflix DVDs, but I agree.
Yeah, so the other point I wanted to make, boy, we're spending a lot of time in this first act, but I think it's good because it sets up the terribleness of the rest of the episode. Yeah. So the crux of it is like Homer is being like a jerk and Flanders is like finally pushed to the edge and he's like, I'm going to take you and your family to Israel and show you the way, which I have a few questions. First of all, Flanders is a nice guy, but I didn't realize he was so nice as to fly the entire Simpsons family out to a trip to Israel.
Several thousands of dollars.
Yeah, which, I can kind of buy that because Flanders is Flanders.
Yeah.
But what I can't really buy was Homer being that bad? I know we were just saying he was being aggressively sarcastic and annoying, but as far as like Flanders being like, this is the last straw where I'm going to take you to Israel to reform you. He was naked in his own yard.
I mean, in terms of the story, like specifically just the minutes we were watching, I was so mad at Homer. I wouldn't have flew him to Israel. I would have like punched him in the face.
Right.
So I like I said, I really was like with Flanders. I was feeling it. I was so frustrated. Like he was like punching the air. He just felt like so helpless. Yeah. So I bought that. But if you in bigger picture, if you're trying to pretend this exists in a grounded world. Why now?
Sadly, I still am.
Right. Why now? You've lived with him for years, and he's not doing anything ridiculously like you would think. I feel like
not just why now in the course of the season or the course of the series, though. Just like was this specific incident enough to incite this plot?
Especially for an Act 1. Usually a Simpsons Act 1, classic and post-classic, they seem to like have this snowball effect where it leads to this big thing that blows up in somebody's face, and then that launch. So like. I feel like you're right. Like it was just it was just lots of small things, unless you consider the random pagan dancing between him, Lisa, and Bart. the big thing. But it should have been like a specific thing where like something broke through the window.
What if the Bible study was at the church and Homer's like outside and he does something horrible to the church? I don't know.
It should be something you can describe in a sentence, something specific. Like
Homer does X, so Flanders takes it to
in real life. Sure, a culmination of events would probably be what leads to it.
Well, in real life and also in good fiction.
Well, no, even in classic substances, usually it's a big event that Bart is always a bad student, and it would make sense at any point for them to go, let's try military school. But they have him set up a bunch of bullhorns and shatter the town. Yeah, and that's
a big event
that's your inciting.
Yeah,
that's your inciting incident.
Right.
So you're right. Like it doesn't make sense. Why would they not try to put one in here? It's very easy to write. It doesn't. I mean, an inciting incident is very easy to write. A good one is harder. But they obviously in other episodes they don't need a good one. They just need one.
Right. I mean, it's really just an excuse to get them to Israel.
Yeah.
But
this wasn't an excuse. It was like 10 tiny excuses, which is not very fun to watch.
No, it's not. So that was the end of the first act.
Yeah.
It was pretty short. I think this was a weird 4-act one. Which still throws me off. I think that might be why it felt like an eternity. Also because it wasn't funny.
Probably.
But anyway. So we come back from the act break, and they're already on the flight to Israel. They're on Air Israel, I guess.
Yeah.
The plane lands, and it breaks the glass like at a
that's right.
Israel.
Yeah.
It was a Jewish wedding.
Yeah.
That was kind of funny.
There was interesting. It was a funny visual gag.
And
then it cuts in medias res to the airport where it's like in the middle of the scene. Homer's already been pinned down by security.
Yes.
I like that because you can almost expect, and I'm pretty sure at this point they've done so many Simpsons Goes To that almost all of those episodes start off with a scene where they arrive in the airport and something happens and Homer does something stupid.
Yeah.
So it was nice for them to just be like, look, he's going to do something
we don't
stupid.
need to show you the stupid thing.
So I actually like they should do that more often because when you start in the middle, and this is drama, action, horror, whatever, when you start in the middle, you get rid of all the quote unquote boring backstory.
Right.
And it's just completely different dynamic for the audience, and it's nice to change it up. So it's like, oh, this is cool. The Simpsons doesn't usually do this.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do, and it's great. I can't think of any specific examples, but it was just refreshing to see. And then it was the beginning. Like the first act was not funny, but the rest of the episode was
even worse.
Painfully unfunny.
Even worse.
And this was the first scene that was like, wow.
So here's what I wrote. Here's what I wrote down. The guards at the airport in Israel have Homer pinned down, and he's saying like. Oh, I think they do. They said what he did. He said latkes weren't as good as pancakes or something. And he's like, oh, I guess they're fine with applesauce. And I wrote down that this was the harbinger of things to come. This episode is just going to be like, hey, this is a Jewish thing, or hey, this is a thing in Israel.
This was the.
And it was.
This was the. I'm trying to think of trying to tie this into the
was
holiday.
Reference-orama.
It was the raining frogs. That was one of the 10 plagues, right?
From the end of Magnolia.
No, from the Bible.
Well, it said both, so yeah.
Whichever, Magnolia.
Spoiler alert
Bible.
for Magnolia.
Spoiler alerts for the Bible. No, it was like I was trying to say it's one of the 10 plagues, like for foreshadowing. I guess the 10th plague.
Side note: I think it had aired. It's gonna have aired by the time we do this because I think it was on Easter Sunday.
I don't think this is gonna air at all at this point.
No, this is a terrible episode. No, on Easter Sunday they aired A.D. The Bible Continues,
which is just the funniest Subway ad I've ever seen.
It's ridiculous that's what it's actually called.
The Bible continues. It's such a like look, obviously there is an audience for it, so we're not gonna shit on it as much as it probably deserves.
Well, I'm fine with them making a mini series about the Bible.
But that's fine. So shameless about trying to make it this cool actiony title.
That's a joke. That's not what you actually call that
fake title. That's like Sharknado. It's A.D.
The Bible continues.
Like you might as well fucking have called it like the Dark of the Moon or whatever the fuck Age of Extinction. So I was really disappointed because I was like, oh wow, what a cool structural technique they're using, and then they immediately just shit all over with an awful applesauce latke joke, and then
it's just not
that
good.
It was bad, and then they free Homer, and then he goes. He's like he gets free because he's like, well, I guess latke is okay with applesauce. So they're like, yeah, I guess you're right. So they have time, and then he just goes, a ton of applesauce.
Yeah, and it's just
like it was painful to.
Yep, and it didn't get better.
Like,
it got
just
worse.
That, like, childish,
again.
sarcastic, like, oh.
Yeah, again, Homer eventually lays on the grave of Jesus.
And again, and then maybe that was the example I was thinking of, where he's just so like he was just being aggressive and spiteful for, like, he's being let go by security. Why are you pushing buttons?
Yeah, why are you being not a human being? You're a human going
Going
to hell.
Stop watching The Simpsons.
That's right.
Homie, just tell them what they want to hear.
I can't. Latkes aren't as good as American pancakes. They're okay with applesauce. True enough. A truckload of applesauce.
Okay, so in that airport scene, Krusty is there, and Lisa goes up to him, and she goes, "I've been wondering, why are you here, Krusty?" Now, I don't know if you're a fan. I do know. I don't know why I said that. You're a fan of Mr. Plinkett, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and The Half in the Bag, which...
Red Letter Media.
Yeah, Red Letter Media. He does, if you haven't checked it out, he does very funny movie critiques. He analyzes
he did the
movies.
Star Wars ones,
Star
were the
Wars
really popular
and the Star
ones.
Trek ones, and then my personal favorite is his Indiana Jones, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull one.
Right.
But he does these like epic 2-hour breakdowns of why these movies failed as movies.
It's a bit like what we do, but
Yeah.
we do it better. But anyway.
And Half in the Bag is another. He has several different web series, but Half in the Bag is one where he just kind of
it's a
and
movie review
another
show.
guy
Yeah.
talk movies, and a very talented guy. I remember he did the Phantom Menace, and he pointed out this thing that once he said that's the beauty of Red Letter Media is, especially the Mr. Plinkett, is they point out really obvious things that somehow you miss, and then you go, oh my god, and then you'll never not see it.
Right.
And there's a scene in Phantom Menace where Jake Lloyd, the young Anakin Skywalker, the kid
Oh, yeah.
Anakin,
We all know who Jake Lloyd
who
is.
was not the best child actor.
He was much better in Jingle All the Way.
And he goes, I've been wondering, what are midichlorians? And like that,
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's like famous for being like, bad exposition is when you basically say, hey, I
Yeah.
need to know information. And he literally prefaced it with,
I've
I've been
been
wondering. Because like, why would you say, so the fact that Lisa literally said a line that is famous among
Yeah.
at least the types of people who I would think would be on the writing staff of The Simpsons.
Big nerds.
Big nerds. I like. How do you repeat such a bad line of bad exposition?
Well,
when she's saying, "I've been wondering," what she's implying is, "Look, Krusty, I've just been on like a 12-hour flight with you. You've
Yeah.
been here the whole time. I've been associating with you in the airport before we got on the
But
plane.
now at this
on the
moment,
I've been wondering.
I've been wondering.
because this is where in the script we need to know
Exactly.
And it was just.
And then this happens.
So
and
now,
then
so
this.
I don't even have to say at this point. It was a bad line. It was bad exposition. I was just
Right.
amazed that she actually just said, "I've been wondering, Krusty, why are you here?"
And also, it was just, like I said, it was just reference Rama with Jewish
Yeah,
things. It's
yeah.
like, hey, Krusty's Jewish. He's like the notable Jewish character on the
Hey,
show.
Krusty,
He's got to be here.
Why are you in Israel? That's also like why you're here.
Because I'm Jewish. Israel. I gotta go catch the bus. Okay, so let's get to one of the bigger threads through this episode, I suppose. Let's talk about Sacha Baron Cohen.
All right.
He's obviously the big guest star for this episode. Yeah. You all know him from Borat and Bruno and Ali G. Mm-hmm. And he is obviously a very funny guy. Well, let's talk about you. Do you like Sacha Baron Cohen in general?
I was never the biggest fan of Ali G when it was out. Mm-hmm. Although I didn't watch it that well, I'm sure, but I don't know. But I loved Borat when I saw it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say, because it got so overplayed. But
overplayed? What are you talking about? I still do Borat stuff.
But
wife.
I thought it was really funny, and I actually like Bruno even more. I think Bruno's even a funnier movie.
I don't agree with you there, but I think Bruno is underrated.
I love Bruno, but when I see, I feel like he's made poor choices in, like he's in the Ricky Bobby, and whenever he's in movies like that. And again, I love Will Ferrell, and I don't like 90% of Will Ferrell movies. So I think it's like that, where I think Sacha Baron Cohen is very funny. I don't really like a lot of the shit he's in. There's not much I would watch that I like him for.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I like the Ali G show. I liked Borat. I like Bruno.
So what did you think about him then in this?
So, having said that I'm a fan of Sacha Baron Cohen, I did not like him in this episode, and I can't exactly pinpoint why, because I think it should have worked. he's playing an Israeli tour guide who talks very, very quickly, and he's kind of like aggressive.
And a big part of his key part of Sacha Baron Cohen's humor in general is it's not, I don't want to say it's funny accents, because he's doing a fairly accurate accent, but it's his delivery, his manner is you can feel it, like the way we move our arms, and you can feel it through the headphones.
Yeah.
You can feel his entire performance through his voice.
Right.
So he's a strong performer.
Definitely.
But you're right. I've been thinking about this since we watched the episode. I don't know why I didn't like it.
Yeah, I wrote this down. Whether or not it's funny, you could tell that Sacha Baron Cohen had so much fun doing this.
Yeah.
Like, it comes through the vocal performance,
And
like us flailing our arms.
Yeah, and you could tell the production team enjoyed him. The fact that they use outtakes for the credits.
Right, I would imagine that he ad-libbed pretty much his entire
That and the fact
stuff.
that the editors just let him go on. And I wrote, in my note that I wrote is, I can't remember the last time they let a guest star just dominate a scene and just talk and talk and talk, with the sole exception of Albert Brooks.
Yeah.
And like, this,
as far as comedy minds are going to go, if you're going to give leeway to two people, those are two people.
That's what I'm saying. It's like,
to.
this is the first time I've seen them. Like, Phil Hartman would be the only other one I'd say, but he didn't dominate a scene with his dialogue so much. He's not really a fast talking. That's not his style. His style was a little bit more laid back, and that's why it was brilliant.
Yeah.
I think Albert Brooks and Sacha Baron Cohen are more similar in the way they deliver at least with their voice acting. And I've never seen them pretty much just hand over the keys in a single scene.
Right.
Like they did it with Albert Brooks in season 1 when he was the used car salesman.
Yeah.
And then he perfected it, you could argue, with Hank Scorpio, where he would just riff, and then they would maybe let Dan Castellaneta, because he had improv
play
background.
off of him. Yeah.
And maybe they let the two of them play off each other. And like Sacha Baron Cohen, in several instances in this episode, just talks. Talks.
Multiple
with
scenes of
nothing
him just ranting.
Yeah.
About how the Jews were kicked out of Spain, about how Israelis aren't pushy,
and
about just everything.
And then big picture, I would find it funny that he was just riffing, although I think it went too long almost every time where I was getting bored. And then small picture, they were like snippets here and there that I thought were funny. So I guess medium picture is where it didn't work for me, if that makes
medium
sense.
Picture.
And I'm bad with accents in general. It's because I live in New York. Almost every
and everyone who lives in New York is bad with accents.
Every job I've ever had, I've pretty much had to deal with lots of like foreigners or immigrants or people who just grew up here with thick accents.
Right.
And I'm hard of hearing. I can't hear people on the phone. So like,
you really are an old man, Jack.
No, so I've always had problem just like hearing people with accents. I really I just can't understand what they're saying. So like, I didn't understand half of what he was saying because he was talking fast and he had the accent. Mm-hmm. So that didn't help.
Yeah, it's difficult, and he's just ranting, and I don't know. It never landed with me as funny. It just felt like he was stringing things along, just like, we're going to get to the gold at some... It was like, we're going to go to the fireworks factory at some point, and just like keeps going and going and going.
Yeah.
And it just never really landed.
Like the joke wasn't... That's why I say big picture, small picture, medium picture. The joke... Any individual joke wasn't the joke. The joke was that he was this guy that just kept talking and like delivering... So here's another big issue I wanted to bring up. Because we're going to talk about how
Amazing Spider-Man #1. Big issue.
It is a big issue. No, we're going to talk about how much we hated this episode.
Yeah.
And there's one thing that's holding me back and saying maybe I'm being too hard on it, and it's that this episode is about Israel. I've never been to Israel, and while I've never been to other places, I also have very little concept of what daily life in Israel is like.
Yeah.
Like, I really have no idea. And so I couldn't tell throughout the episode how much of this stuff was like sharp satire, like, oh man, that's a really good point. And you know, and that includes Sacha Baron Cohen, who I'm assuming is playing like a certain type of person that you would find often in Israel. And he also at some point says the pushy Israeli, which I have like through pop culture, I have some semblance. I know it exists, but I don't know it enough to like really know if he's doing a good job of it.
Yeah, right. Are they zinging this? or are they just
I can't
like...
tell if he's nailing it, or
Right.
if it's a really offensive impression, or if it's a really just bland impression. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know
It's
either.
like if you were to do an impression of like a Martian and be like, "How is my Martian impression?" I go, "I don't fucking know. I've never seen a Martian. I don't know."
this makes me very angry.
Yeah. So like, if he was doing
my
like,
Martian
if he was
impression.
doing
It's
like
Marvin the Martian.
like a Jewish immigrant from New York,
Yeah.
you know, from like the Lower East Side, I could have a better sense of saying, "Oh man, I know 100 guys like that."
Yeah.
But with this, I couldn't tell with his performance.
Do you
if he
often hang out with the immigrants on the Lower East Side?
well, if you work in the Lower East Side as long as
Yeah,
I have,
all right.
it's a lot of immigrants.
Okay, that's fine.
It's a lot of people, natives.
And I would think that some of their stories of Israel would have gotten into you, and you'd be the best judge of this episode.
They did. I just couldn't understand what they were saying.
Oh, all right, fair enough. That's the joke. That's Sacha Baron Cohen's doing.
My point is, I'm pretty sure the big joke,
Yeah.
was that he was just this onslaught of talking. It wasn't just Sacha Baron Cohen. Is doing it. It's Sacha Baron Cohen's really good at doing the type of person who just talks and talks and talks, and that's why they picked him for this. And like, I can't tell if that's the joke. If the joke isn't specifically what he's saying, but how he's saying it, I don't know if it's good or not, because I don't know how it's supposed to be said.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't really know where I land with Sacha Baron Cohen in this episode, but I didn't think it was very funny. Whatever they were trying to do with it, whether it was satire or not,
Didn't work
It didn't
for
work
us.
for us. So I did think it was kind of a bit indicative of new episodes where they have the celebrity voice and they have to make the celebrity voice like a major part of the episode, but they don't really do a great job integrating him or her.
Yeah.
So in this episode, he's playing a tour guide in Israel, which works. That's fine. But the tour is never really a major aspect to the episode.
If anything, it's just a plot device.
It's just a way to get them from to all these different
Which makes
landmarks.
sense if you're doing The Simpsons Goes To.
Yeah, it's fine.
Pretty much all tours.
He just it seems like they're on this tour for forever because there's multiple days, but he's always around.
Yeah.
And B, it's just like...
Again, I don't travel. Maybe that's how it works. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it could be like a multi-day tour thing. But it just felt like he was just there throughout the episode. He wasn't doing anything to really influence the episode, which I guess is fine, but they give him so much time. It's like, couldn't they have integrated him a little bit better into the story?
The Homer Flanders plot at the very least.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
that's really the only plot going on. What is the other plot? Bart getting into a Krav Maga fight with a girl?
You're right. So the best comparison I have is Albert Brooks. And I'm trying to think of an Albert Brooks character that, they all dominated pretty much. Whenever he was on an episode, he dominated. I'm trying to think of one that actually wasn't integral to the plot. I can't think of one. The used car salesman was big.
Yeah.
Scorpio, obviously.
Brad Goodman.
Brad Goodman. There was a later one where he played like Bart's fat counselor or something like that.
We may have to watch that episode because that is a good post-classic episode.
I vaguely remember, but I remember it was
almost entirely because of Albert Brooks.
Key to the plot.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it's season 15
and then
16.
One of his weaker performances was as the president in the movie, which we'll get to eventually. But that I guess
have no comment on that.
Even that was still somewhat tied to the plot. So
yeah.
So maybe we would have really liked his performance better if Nothing exists in a vacuum. Jokes are funnier when they're tied into the story and they have a stronger context.
And they're like based in character and things like that. But it seemed like not only is he not organically part of the episode's story, the episode doesn't really have a story, and it just turns into, hey, this thing from Israel, hey, this other thing.
Which is the standard Simpsons go-to.
Right. Loosely, the story is Flanders is trying to reform Homer, and Homer is terrible.
Which I feel like we've seen several times.
We have seen it several times, but they don't really set it up correctly, as we talked about before. It doesn't really pay off right, because jumping to the end, Homer eventually thinks he is the Messiah. That's how this episode ends.
Yeah.
And Flanders is like, well, it took a while, but it worked. Even though Flanders had no bearing on that happening to Homer at all.
Yeah, he didn't. Maybe he thinks. I guess he does. He thinks he got through to him. So I guess that was enough for Flanders. Even though technically it was Homer passing out from being in the desert and hallucinating the VeggieTales. Which, sure, I know the Simpsons have made VeggieTales references before. The writers and kids must have liked it, and they found it humorous that there's talking religious vegetables.
It is kind of funny that they're talking religious vegetables.
And they are well animated. They're funny to look at. But whatever. I did like at some point Homer's ranting or whatever, and there's just like a wide shot of the three vegetables, and they all just kind of like give side glances.
Yeah, right.
That was decently animated.
That was kind of funny. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's no resolution, but I guess Flanders did buy that he got to Homer, so that was good enough for him. But the main reason it doesn't work is because, like you said, they didn't really set up a big conflict anyway.
There's no through line on which to hang the jokes. We've talked about this for other episodes.
I mean, a lot of series are based on character dynamics, and one of the Simpsons character dynamics that's been most consistent is Homer and Flanders don't get along.
Yeah.
So it's weird to do an episode on, hey, here's that thing we do all the time, and we're not going to really...
And we're not doing it.
We're not going to put a situation that exacerbates it. I guess the fact that they're in the Holy Land is what's supposed to exacerbate it, but, Homer sleeping on Jesus' tomb and such.
Yeah. But it's just Homer's acting so out of character to make Flanders more annoyed because it is the Holy Land.
Yeah.
Why don't you just have Homer be Homer? He doesn't have to be, monstrous, awful, jerk-ass Homer.
We said this, not last week, because last week was Empty Nest.
Last week
we said
were talking
this
about Dreyfus.
a couple weeks ago where it would have been funnier. Oh, it was the Kill the Alligator and Run. And I was saying it would have been funnier if it was the Simpsons as themselves in the South on the run, not them turning into these weird Southern
people.
Yeah, that's whatever. You want to see Southern people in the South, you go to the South.
Right.
I want to see the Simpsons in the South.
Then you go to...
Watch
Simpsons.
a good episode of The Simpsons in the South.
Yes.
So that's what this was. Yeah, it would have been way funnier to see Homer Simpson in the Holy Land, not stupid jerk ass.
And there's a scene where they are in, I don't know what exact landmark it was. I'm sure it's something super famous, and we'll get letters.
The Leaning Tower of Pisa.
That's exactly what it was. They're in Israel, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. No, they're in some sort of, it looks like it's some sort of tomb or below a church maybe. And Homer has his camera out. And he makes Flanders tell him to shut the camera off in a Dracula voice.
Yeah.
For no reason.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any connection between Dracula and Israel.
That seems to be that vein of, especially that era of The Simpsons, where they were just doing silly,
random for the sake of random.
It was kind of like a Adult Swim Aqua Teen bleeding into it there.
Well, it's not bleeding in well. But he makes him do that, and Flanders does it, and so Homer puts the camera away, and then Homer's phone rings, and it's Flanders going blah blah as Dracula, which I don't understand how that works since Homer just did it. But also,
it's because you're not in it with the technology. You don't even know what Periscope is.
That's true. That is very true. But what's the joke? I guess Homer's just continuing to be awful. He put away one electronic device, but he's still got another one. But why did it have to be this weird Flanders Dracula thing?
Yeah. It's
really, what the fuck?
It's really, really frustrating to feel so strongly against something and not be able to put it into concrete thoughts or words.
This episode confused me and I hated it. That's how I feel.
It's really. I was listening to a sci-fi podcast today, a science podcast. It was a really old episode that I was way backed up on about how the brain processes scary music, and it's something. It's all right. Drink your Popeyes. Okay. Oh, I spoiled it.
No! The sweepstakes is over.
Well, there it is.
I drink Popeyes, by the way. I liquefied the chicken.
No, so
better.
So it's Science Friday. They're talking about how the big theory of why scary music works the way it is, and dissonant music in general, is because the brain prefers order. It prefers. And so this episode is dissonant to me. It's really unsettling to me because my brain knows it was a terrible episode and it's trying to figure out why. And I can't give you a really good reason. And it's frustrating.
We have little bits.
We're hosting a show about why we're supposed to, it's not just anybody could say this episode is bad. We're trying to tell you why it was bad and we can't.
Right, and break it down.
I mean, it's really frustrating.
We've hit a lot of little things, plot-wise that don't work, and Sacha Baron Cohen maybe doesn't totally work, but we can't quite put the. It feels like we're dancing around the bullseye. Yeah. If you can't see, I'm miming dancing around a bullseye.
Is that what that is? It looked like a bad Thriller.
Bullseye. Why am I doing such visual humor?
I don't know.
On this
audio, we gotta start periscoping.
We're gonna start periscoping the show. That's what we're gonna do.
No, so we love our small but vocal online community. Mm-hmm. If you guys can do a better job, we will not be embarrassed. Please, please tell us what this bullseye that we're missing is, because it's really frustrating. I hate this episode, and I don't know why.
Well, there was a scene right after what we were just talking about that I want to bring up. They're at the Wailing Wall, which is a very holy place. Mm-hmm. People write down prayers and they put it on paper into the Wailing Wall. And there were two things that kind of happened there. The first is Krusty writes down that he wants help with parking tickets, which, okay, that could be a thing.
Yeah.
there's some humor to that.
Whatever.
But as Krusty's writing it, he's just reading out the numbers of the ticket. And it was just like, I need help with ticket A97654-24621 in Shelbyville.
Yeah.
It's just a minute of Krusty reading letters and numbers at the Wailing Wall.
I like the idea that, like, God, if you're praying to God, he needs to have, he's sitting at a computer
He needs
answering
the
the prayers. And he
specifics.
needs I think what failed there was maybe
I think it
Krusty's
just went on too
delivery.
long, I guess.
And maybe it was the pacing.
Like, maybe if he was just like, I need help with the following tickets. A123, and it just cut away. Just
Yeah,
like, we
yeah.
don't need to see,
You're right,
see
you're
him
right. So
reading all of them.
I think it was a combination of delivery and then probably, you're right, more so the production, the direction, the editing, whatever.
Right, whatever. We'll knock this episode on production.
Yeah.
All right, the second thing at the Wailing Wall was that Bart is just going around reading people's prayers, which is pretty offensive, I think.
I guess, I don't know.
It was. But then he just like skateboards on the Wailing Wall and turns into a chase scene with this little Israeli girl that goes nowhere and it's nothing. It's just them. They eventually start fighting and Bart's like, karate.
They didn't really do much with that character.
And she's like, Krav Maga, and then she explains what Krav Maga is, and that's the scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's at this point.
There's no joke.
There's a running gag where Bart goes karate, like that's become a thing to the point where now they can riff on it and have her say Krav Maga.
Is that what that was supposed to be?
Yeah, that was her riffing on Bart's famous line. You know, Bart had. Remember they made all the T-shirts in the early '90s that said karate.
Karate.
That's what that was. It was riffing on that new running joke that they think is funny.
Well, it was awful because it was really just a little girl explaining what Krav Maga is.
And I like the idea that a little girl beat him up because that's one of the few things I know about Israeli culture that fascinates me is that the women are treated equally with the men in terms of military service.
Yeah.
But they didn't do much else with the character. Like at first she doesnn't say anything. She says like one line and I was like, oh man, this character's mysterious. Where's it going? And it went nowhere.
No, it went nowhere. It was just this one scene and that's basically it. Was she supposed to be Sacha Baron Cohen's daughter too?
Niece, he said.
Oh, did they actually say that? All right, I blocked it.
It was
out.
somewhere in the speech.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this already, but they go to the resting place of Jesus, or what's presumed to be the resting place of Jesus, and Homer is horrible. He lays down on it. But he also, Flanders comes in and says, this is where the body of the most famous person in the world is. And Homer's like, Porky Pig? And like...
That is, if you're going to pick a random character, it's pretty funny.
In my head, I was like, this should be really funny. But maybe it was just the way they did it.
It was the delivery. It was the fact that Homer was such a jerk ass that like at this point, you're not going to be on his side.
Yeah, maybe
like,
that
a
was
sympathetic regular Homer thing, for somehow thinking Porky Pig was there. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because Flanders flips out and he's like, that's not even a person. And, like, that was funny, but then I guess Homer kept going with it. And it was just
Anyway,
like,
Porky Pig, I don't think he gets enough credit in modern society. He is a fucking funny character.
I believe that's right, Jack.
It's hard to be the straight man because he
Porky
usually
Pig
is
is
put
here.
up
I don't know if
against.
you
Go to the bus, whatever.
There's plenty of room at the bus.
What if a Dalek took over a Porky Pig?
Exterminate! That's all, folks. Sorry, we're cutting this.
Terrible. By the way, we'll add this to the delete scenes because we're running long.
Yeah.
But should we keep it in the? I don't know. But we finally got to see that diorama in person that we talked about a couple weeks ago that somebody made of us.
Yes.
Made of Wii Studio, and it was it was even better in person.
Yeah.
But one feature we didn't notice was that she did. Was you can open up the Dalek and Dan Hedaya's in there, so it's actually Dan Hedalek.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then I was thinking about it again today, and I was like, it's actually dark if you know the history of the Daleks,
right?
That they're these fragile creatures trapped inside a Dalek.
Yeah.
It's kind of so that means that the actual Dan Hedaya at some point was kidnapped by Daleks and assimilated into their mechanical culture.
We are big fans of the Tortellis, and we will assimilate.
So. Yeah, I felt a little bad for the guy.
Yeah.
But, anyway.
It's tough. Well, he's got those Dick dollars from when he was in Dick.
Anyway, Porky Pig, very funny character. He deserves more credit.
Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff here that I don't really have that much to say. Let's just run through it.
Let's run through them.
Homer says he was only taking pictures of soft drinks that he thought were funny, and some of them were kind of funny.
Couple
One was
of them.
Oi, and
Oi
it
was
was lemon
funny.
lime Oi.
Yeah.
One was just the Star of David with an exclamation point. That was kind of funny.
I do find that fascinating. The other culture sodas and candy bars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I get a kick out of that.
Yep.
As somebody who never ever leaves the Lower East Side, apparently.
You don't need to. You have all your immigrant friends. You experience all cultures.
It's a modern day melting pot.
It's a wonderful restaurant. Then Homer and Flanders have a fight, and Homer thinks that Flanders goes out into the desert, and then Homer goes into the desert to follow him. But then Flanders really goes to the movies to go watch The Reformers. And it was like a Transformers parody where they were like Hebrew, and they just sit down and read the Torah instead of fighting.
Simpsons, for some reason, I get a kick out of the way at least they animate and voice act blockbuster movies. They've done a few Transformer parodies, and like I said, once they did a Cosmic Wars parody with the AT-AT, the AT-ATs. I thought they do big robots funny.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea.
But the idea of it was
like Jewish Transformers, and what would that be like? But I didn't think
the
the
Reformers
payoff
isn't.
was it.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, and I was like, that really fucking sounds nerdy and stupid. But I'll say it anyway.
All right, say it.
This is a
nerdy and stupid podcast.
The Reformers was one syllable short to be quite the adequately funny riff on the Transformers.
It should have been like the Man Reformers. No, that doesn't work.
No, don't worry about it. But
I'm pretty worried about it now. I'm very worried about it. Okay, so Homer goes into the desert looking for Flanders. Flanders isn't really there. Homer passes out. He sees the VeggieTales, which we kind of already talked about. And then it comes back, and Marge comes out in a Jeep with some, like, Israeli guard.
Yeah, they just
And they
show
find
up.
Homer.
Yeah.
There's no explanation as to how they knew he was in the desert.
In the middle of the desert.
How they knew where he was in a huge desert.
Yeah.
But I guess that's just where we are.
Yeah, you're right.
There was no bearing on anything. It was just, now we need Homer to come back, now that he's out of his vision. I was very surprised. I thought the episode was ending, and then there was a whole other storyline that happened where Homer thinks he is the Messiah.
Yeah, I guess that's the B plot, sort of.
Yes, I don't know what that was. The note that I wrote is this episode is fucking terrible.
So he thinks he's the Messiah, and then he's supposed to unite Jews and Christians and Muslims and start one religion. He uses chicken as an analogy. Like, look, you people can't eat pork, you people can't eat beef, but we can all eat chicken.
Right.
And at first I was like, you know what? That's a clever way of being like, doing a metaphor for uniting religions.
Yeah.
But I was also like, except vegetarians can't eat it, and your daughter's one.
That's true.
That's nitpicking.
That's true. I liked the chicken
It's a clever
thing.
touch, yeah.
And it made me think of Popeyes.
Which, by
Popeyes
the way,
unites
if
all
you haven't been
religions.
paying attention, we've already referenced at least 1.5 times. It was Dad eating the Popeyes.
I like the Popeyes. What can I say?
And so ends the.
Our winner was.
The Da Vinci Code was the eye thing, right?
No, I don't think we had a name for the Popeye
all right.
sweepstakes.
Whatever. So ends the Popeyes running gag of episode 26. The one thing I did really like about the Messiah is because then Agnes comes out, it's like, I'm the Messiah. I was like, ugh.
Right.
But then Hibbert, there's like a close-up of Hibbert. He goes, oh my God. It looks like the Jerusalem syndrome, like the desert sickness or whatever the fuck
Jerusalem
it was,
syndrome, yeah.
is spreading. And then it zooms out, and he goes,
This looks a job for the Messiah.
Yeah. And like, it was a funny reveal, even if it was telegraphed. It was still a funny reveal, and it's Harry Shearer delivers Dr. Hibbert jokes really well, even in the post-classic era.
That was probably the funniest moment of the episode.
We've said that Willie has been fairly immune to the post-classic type of writing and directing. He's still like very funny in the same ways he was. Yeah. I think we said before that Hibbert as well is still pretty much Hibbert.
Still pretty good.
So that was a great Hibbert line.
Yeah, I think that's it. We kind of rushed through the end of there, but nothing really of importance happened. Like, we were already soured on this episode.
Right.
I knew it was bad.
I'll shoehorn in 2 real quick things I wanted to bring up. There's a fiddler on the roof joke that was okay, but then they go, get back to cleaning the roof, and he used the bow to his fiddle. Yeah. And I thought that was a funny visual to use his bow gutting it. And then I thought even funnier was where Marge is like, there's so many like special important places. We're in the Holy Land.
Yeah.
Jesus might have been in conference room
Oh
C.
yeah, how many talks could Jesus have given in conference?
Yeah, and I like that idea.
Yeah.
Like the idea of the modern and the historical and traditional combining in that way.
Right.
I think that was amusing. I'm sure, especially in the Holy Land and in Jerusalem and in Israel, that's a very funny, prevalent thing. But I appreciate it just because even in like New York, that's one of the things that interests me as a person is like this meshing of modern and historical.
That makes
so
sense.
I like that joke.
All right.
So I wanted. We're gonna shit on this episode a lot, I think, in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just give it its due.
All right. Well, we appreciate that, Jack.
Uh-oh. Got another case of Jerusalem syndrome. This looks like a job for the Messiah.
Okay, so I think it is time to rank this episode, which we do on a 4-factor test, the Hippo scale, as we call it. We're going to look at the humor of the episode, the integrity of the episode. That's kind of like the story, how did it hold up, or the characters themselves. And those 2 factors weigh more against the other 2 factors, which are the production of the episode. Did we like how it was animated, how it looked, how it sounded, and the originality of the episode, which is kind of just, I guess, like a gut thing.
How much Dreyfus
original,
was in the episode?
That's exactly right.
Which is going to get a 0.
Okay, so we'll put some time on the clock here, and let's run through this. So let's talk about the humor of this episode.
0,
unequivocally a 0.
No, I'm gonna give it a 0.5.
I'm actually giving it a 0. I really.
There was, like I said, I chuckled at a few things.
I think I laughed at the Hibbert thing and maybe one other thing, but just the other things that were supposed to be funny were so aggressively not funny to me that I want this episode to suffer, and I will give it a 0.
I'm trying to imagine what I'd give a 0. I'd like to. I want to leave room for the bar. So
Okay.
0.5.
I'm thinking this is the bar. So the integrity of the episode. I mean, we talked at length about how bad Homer was. Jerk-ass Homer.
I don't think he was worse than in Bonfire of the Manatees because, again, I think being a jerk-ass in general is not as bad as being a jerk-ass to your one true love who puts up with you. But this was probably the second worst Homer we've seen so far.
I agree with you. And I gave Bonfire of the Manatees a 0. You gave it
running out of time.
a 0.5.
All right.
So I'm going to give it a 0.5 based mostly on Homer, but also on the whole like weird Bart subplot that didn't mean anything, and just like the Lisa I've been wondering.
Right.
Just all of those awful things together.
I'm not locking in my score right away. I'm wavering between 0.5 and 1.
Okay. The production of this episode, I mean...
It's the one thing I liked. Again,
this is the one thing I liked,
the pupils really bothered me.
Yeah, that's true.
But there were a lot of visuals, like the VeggieTale side glances, the running over the glass with the plane, the direction of Hibbert's joke. I would say that slightly overcomes the pupils. I'm still wavering between 2.5 and 3.
I'm probably going to go on the lower end, but I'm also wavering. I'm not sure where I'm going to go with this yet. Probably a 1. I'm going to say a 1, just because, Israel looked fine, I guess, but there was nothing especially great that jumped out.
Right.
And the originality of this episode,
it's a go-to. It's
another Simpsons go-to.
And then every once in a while they do find a good storyline to base that on.
Yeah.
Not this time.
Not this time. And also a good chunk of the episode is just letting Sacha Baron Cohen riff, which isn't even writing.
Which could have been good if it was,
It could have been good. It wasn't. I'm going pretty low.
1.
I think I'm going to say a 1 also.
And I'm actually thinking about a 0.5.
Okay, so we have crunched our numbers, and this is a big one.
It was bad.
This was bad. This was real bad. We have a new worst episode ever.
Wow.
And it is this one.
So
it is the greatest story ever doed.
Ironic that
it's probably our worst show ever, too.
No, not only is it worse than our Bonfire of the Manatees, which we hated.
Yes.
It was considerably so. Like it's going to be hard for when we found a replacement for Battlestar Galactica. It was Lisa Goes Gaga.
Right.
We were concerned that we peaked at our 9th episode and that we wouldn't find a worse one.
Yeah.
And then Bonfire of the Manatees
a couple of weeks
worse
later,
than that
came along,
and then we said,
and that stood for a long time.
Yeah, but this score is really low.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I mean, we got like 500 episodes to go.
Yeah, Moe's rag is still out there in the ether, so
yes.
We'll see.
Moe's rag, is it dipped in ether? Is that what he's using as
I didn't see the episode.
Yeah, so that is our new worst episode ever. I'm sad I had to sit through it. I'm sad you had to sit through it.
I feel like we were trying to like pay homage to Easter and Passover. I feel like we've done the opposite.
It was disgraceful.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is it for this episode. But if you have a terrible Simpsons episode you would like to suggest, if you think you can go worse than this one, they must be out there, but we'll see. You can do that at weepodcast.com, weepodcast.com, and from there you can email us. You can get to our Twitter at worstepisodepod, and you can post on the site. You can get to our Facebook. There's all sorts of things. You can click through the Amazon link. We would really appreciate that. That helps
to those
us
who have, thank
make
you.
a little cash. So do that there, weepodcast.com. Thanks for downloading the show. Thanks for your iTunes reviews.
5-star reviews.
We've gotten a few new iTunes reviews, so that's good.
More.
More would be
Give us
great.
more.
Stitcher reviews would be great if anyone uses Stitcher. I don't know. We still only have the 3 we've always had.
Give us a 4th.
That's right. And if you are in the Brooklyn area, you can come to Woohoo Classic Simpsons Trivia. I host that every month with friend of the show, Dan Ozzie. That is the first Thursday of every month, so you just missed April's, but May's is coming up. I think it's May 6th. And if you are in Chicago or Toronto or Vancouver or Calgary or Ann Arbor and Philadelphia, I think that might be all of them, actually. Okay. I finally remembered them. Just Google Woohoo Classic Simpsons Trivia to find out more information about that on the internet. And next week, we're going to be back with a new contender for worst episode ever. We're going to be watching The Book Job. Oh. I don't know which season it is off the top of my head.
We'll talk about it next week.
All right. So The Book Job, we'll do that next week. And that's it for this episode of Worst Episode Ever. Thanks, everybody, and we'll end the show the same way we always do. Jack, you want to take it away with the traditional ending?
The end.
Perfect.
Not the best ad-libber.
Cut all this.
Why don't you try having your people being thrown out of Spain? Spain, no tapas. I love eating tapas. I love the tiny portions. You don't get too full, but you have a whole variety of flavors. Not for me. Every day hummus and pita. Occasionally, once a week, a little bit of falafel.